off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Lake Huron UFO. Just this past weekend, on Sunday, February 12th, US officials were able to confirm that the Air Force and the National Guard had downed a UFO that was seen over Lake Huron, which has a shoreline that is shared by the US state Michigan as well as the Canadian province of Ontario, where I am right now. Representative Alyssa Slotkin, a Michigan Democrat, not only confirmed the downing, but also took to Twitter to write, quote, "Great work by all who carried out this mission both in the air and back at headquarters. We're all interested in exactly what this object was and its purpose." Of course, this only worked to fuel rumors over what exactly this UFO could actually be or where it came from. The Department of Defense is said to have been tracking the flying object for some time before it decided that action needed to be taken in order to get the object out of airspace. So far, while there still hasn't been any confirmations of what exactly this object was, it has been described as a, quote, octagonal structure. Right now, recovery efforts of the debris is underway, but as of filming this, there have been no official reports of what exactly this UFO might have been or where it came from. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Yukon UFO. On Saturday, February 11th, just a day before the Lake Huron UFO, a US fighter jet shot down this unidentified flying object that was in the skies above Yukon, a Canadian territory. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took to Twitter to let Canadians know that he had ordered the, quote, takedown of an unidentified object that violated Canadian airspace. In an effort to take down the UFO, both Canadian and US aircrafts were scrambled, and Air Force members took to the sky to execute the successful downing of the object. Canadian forces are now working to recover and analyze the wreckage of this UFO to hopefully identify its origin. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, also known as NORAD, had initially detected the object flying at a high altitude over Alaska on Friday evening, and on Saturday is when it crossed into Canadian airspace. Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Pat Ryder explained that, quote, a US F-22 shot down the object in Canadian territory using an AIM-9X missile following close coordination between US and Canadian authorities. Both Canadians and Americans are on high alert with this UFO, considering it is just one of the many that have been taken out of airspace in the last couple weeks alone. Like I mentioned before, right now the Canadian Armed Forces and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are working on recovering the wreckage, but the FBI will also be working closely with the RCMP during the investigation. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Alaska UFO. Okay, we're doing like a reverse timeline for these few points because now we are talking about the Alaska UFO that was shot down one day before the Yukon UFO. It was like Alaska, Yukon, Lake Huron. On February 10th, an F-22 US fighter jet shot down an unidentified object over the waters near Alaska. The object was said to have been caught flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and was deemed a, quote, reasonable threat to aviation, which is why the orders were given to take it down. The object was first detected the day before, and a flyby happened on the Thursday it was seen, before the second flyby and takedown which took place on the Friday. Here's where things get really suspicious though. The pilots who were sent up to investigate and take down the UFO all gave differing reports of what it was that they saw. Some of the pilots even say that the UFO interfered with their sensors, and others claimed that they couldn't see any kind of propulsion system on the object, which poses the question, how could it have possibly been just casually cruising 40,000 feet in the air? In a statement over the weekend, the US Northern Command said that they have no new information about the object's, quote, capabilities, purpose, or origin, and they also explained that the recovery efforts are being slowed down by the icy conditions in the region. The National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, John Kirby, said of the object, quote, we're calling this an object because that's the best description we have right now. He continued to say, quote, we don't know who owns it, whether it's state-owned or corporate-owned or privately owned, we just don't know. People are especially concerned about this UFO in particular because of the important military sites in Alaska, as well as its very close proximity to its neighboring countries. In our number 7 spot today, we have the balloon. On February 4th, it became public knowledge that officials were monitoring a strange object in the sky that they claimed had entered airspace above Alaska on January 28th. They monitored the object as it later drifted from Idaho southeast to the Carolinas before the decision was made to take it down. This operation was carried out and the object was shot down. As it turns out, this object was realized to be some kind of a balloon. The balloon is said to have been about the size of 3 buses, and it was flying at an altitude of around 60,000 to 65,000 feet. Authorities were able to discover that the origin of this object was from China, but there are conflicting accounts of what its purpose might have been. China has maintained that the device was a civilian aircraft that strayed into American airspace, but senior American officials officials are seemingly believing that the balloon was originally supposed to conduct surveillance. Many believe that the spying was to be done over US military bases in Guam and Hawaii, but winds carried it off course to Alaska, Canada, and finally the United States mainland, where it was then shot down. Whatever this balloon was for, I'm just glad that we know what this one was and where it had come from, because some of these other recent UFOs are just too mysterious. In our number 6 spot today, we have the classified report. We are just scratching the surface of our time in 2023, but already there were some crazy announcements, including one regarding a report that was delivered to Congress from the Director of National Intelligence. Basically, since August of last year, there has been a total of 510 quote unidentified aerial phenomena observed in protected airspace or near sensitive facilities. According to the report, 26 of these were described as drones, 163 were labeled as balloons or balloon-like entities, and 6 were described as clutter, whatever that means. This is all fine and well, but the concern sets in when we consider that this leaves 171 sightings unaccounted for, some of which, quote, appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. It's also important to note that the majority of these sightings are coming directly from Navy and Air Force pilots. Here's the thing, what we as the public know is only a 12-page declassified summary of the actual real secret report that was delivered to Congress. Only time will tell if we ever find out what the rest of the report includes or what will happen with further investigation into the 171 sightings, but hopefully if answers do arise, one day we'll find out. In our number 5 spot today, we have the 2021 UFO. On February 21st of 2021, a blogger was using a radio scanner to try and pick up from an aircraft when he received much more than he ever expected. He intercepted the transmission of the wrong aircraft, but at the right time. As an American Airlines flight was headed from Cincinnati to Phoenix around 1:19 p.m., the pilot came on the radio to ask the question, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over top of us." After this, he followed up with, "I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast right over the top of us." Not only were FAA air traffic controllers not able to see any object in the area on their radar scope, but they still have been unable to identify exactly what it could have been. This does happen more often than any of us really know, and it is possible that the object could have been a part of some covert military or Navy operation, but it certainly raises some alarm bells that it was unable to be tracked in any sort of capacity. I wonder if this is one of those stories that will remain a mystery, or if one day we'll get some sort of answers as to what exactly happened here. In our number 4 spot today, we have the 2023 sighting. This UFO video was taken recently on January 22nd, and the video was posted to Reddit by a user called MaxKeller96, and with the video, they gave some context. Quote, "My sister, dad, and I were out hiking near Picket Post when one of us noticed something glimmering near the mountain, so we stopped to look at it. All I could really make out is that it was a small bright dot in the sky. After a good 15 seconds of staring at it, just silently hanging in the air, trying to figure out what the was, I started recording. Sorry it's shaky, I could barely see my phone screen and was trying to get a good look at it with my own eyes. It then dropped 2 flare-looking things, though my sister swears she counted at least 3, and then it instantly sped off, heading south-ish. Up until that point, I thought it might have been a helicopter or a drone, as there's a lot of military/Air Force-based stuff out here, but there's no way anything can accelerate that fast. We all lost sight of it nearly instantly after video cuts, and we were all properly freaked out about it. I've replayed the video probably 100 times and tried showing it to everyone I know, and no one had any idea what it could be other than a super high-end drone. If you think you know, please let me know. After watching the video also probably 100 times, I can definitely say that I have no idea what they all saw that day, because I also really don't think it was a drone. I also have to say that this video even gathered people together on Reddit, and that is no easy feat. Redditors are ruthless, and often very skeptical, and still people are pretty on board and confused over what this could have been. In our number 3 spot today, we have the USS Princeton UFO. This UFO sighting comes from 2004, but footage of it was released in 2017. On November 14th of 2004, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out around 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Black Aces Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate of Strike Fighter Squadron 41 went over in 2 fighter jets in order to kind of scope out the situation, and when they arrived arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, a white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it, like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust, which is especially peculiar when we think of what the pilots who just shot down the Alaska UFO said. No propulsion, right? Gives me chills just thinking about it, because how could that be possible? The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. Like, when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of the fighter jets. Faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what this was, because it definitely seems like we don't have the technology to make this sort of thing possible. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Chicago UFO. This UFO sighting comes from November 7th, 2006, and it was at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. Flight 446 was getting ready to head to North Carolina when an employee from United Airlines that was on the tarmac noticed a dark gray metallic aircraft hovering over one of the gates. After this, 11 other employees and even a few people who didn't work there saw this gray saucer floating at around 4:15 p.m. The people who saw it explained that it hovered above the gate for about 5 minutes before it just shot itself upwards and broke through the clouds, leaving a hole in the clouds where you could see the blue sky through. The strangest thing, however, is that this flying saucer did not show up on the radar, so the Federal Aviation Administration just called it a weather phenomena and would not investigate it, despite there being around 15 witnesses who all saw exactly the same thing. This story did, however, become one of the most read stories on the Chicago Tribune's website, and even went international because it certainly is very interesting. And finally, in our number 1 spot, we have the Stephenville UFO. In January of 2008, in the small town of Stephenville, Texas, a bunch of residents all saw something in the sky that they couldn't believe. In the beginning, it appeared to be white lights in the sky that were first in a single arc, but then they quickly moved to form 2 parallel lines. It was estimated that the lights were spanning about a mile long and half a mile wide. Craziest part is that it was flying at 3,000 miles per hour, which is similar to the speed of a fighter jet, but there was no sound reported at all. The government chalked this sighting up to the US Air Force flight operation, but many of the residents who saw this event on that day were absolutely not convinced and truly felt like they were lied to. Some even explained that what they saw was too technologically advanced for the human civilization. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the Valençol incident. Everywhere's gotta have their Roswell incident, and this one is said to be France's. This sighting was made by a man named Maurice Masse, who is a French farmer, and it took place in July of 1965. One day, before starting work while outside smoking, Maurice witnessed an object coming out of the sky and landing in his lavender field about 200 feet away from where he was. He was, of course, frustrated at someone landing in his field, and figured that it was likely a helicopter that made some sort of unauthorized landing, but as he got closer, things took quite the turn. He realized this was no helicopter, and instead was some sort of oval-shaped structure that was standing on 4 legs. In front of the strange craft were 2 figures, just under 4 feet tall. He explained that they were making a sort of grumbling sound, and included a brief description of these creatures before explaining that one of them took out a pencil-like device and pointed it at him, which left him completely stuck in his tracks, just frozen in time. As he was stuck there, the creatures got back on their craft and took off, and after about 20 minutes, he finally regained his ability to move. Here's the thing, to me this just sounds like a fantastical story, but there was some kind of physical evidence left behind that I, and many others, can't quite figure out an explanation to. Basically, the craft did end up leaving a mark. There was a hole and a lot of moisture left over from where the craft was. Like I mentioned, this was in the middle of a lavender field. Soon after this area became really hard, almost like concrete, and definitely not like the soil everywhere else in the field, and all of the plants around this area started to die. Analysis of the soil revealed that there was a higher amount of calcium in the soil at the landing site than there was anywhere else. This definitely shows that there was some kind of unusual event, but could Maurice be telling the truth? In our number 9 spot today, we have the Broadhaven UFO sightings. This UFO sighting took place all the way back in 1977, and it started when an entire class of children all claimed to see some sort of object flying through the sky. The children rightfully were confused and excited over what they had seen, but of course the teachers and adults around them believed it was just their wild imaginations making it up. This is when they decided to split all of the children up and have them draw what it is that they saw. While there of course were variations in all of the children's drawings, they all were basically the same thing, which begs the question, did they all really see this thing then? The children weren't the only ones who saw it either. Shortly after their sighting, other local residents began to explain that they had seen something strange flying through the air, including one hotel owner. One of the things that really gets people about this case and these sightings in particular is that all these different people claimed to have seen something at that time, and even though it's been almost half a century, not a single one of them has ever said that it was a hoax or that they were lying about what they saw. They all have the same story they did the day that it happened. In our number 8 spot today, we have Project Grudge Report 13. Okay, so I've read quite a few different UFO sighting stories and stories of alleged alien abductions, and this is fully one of the most terrifying that I have ever heard of. So basically, the story starts off in March of 1956 when Air Force Sergeant Jonathan P. Lovett was assisting Major William Cunningham in the White Sands Missile Testing Grounds near Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. The pair were out searching for debris from a recent rocket test when Major Cunningham heard a loud scream. His first thought was that Sergeant Lovett had been bitten by a snake, so he went around to help aid his partner when he allegedly saw something he never expected. He recounted seeing the sergeant being dragged away by some sort of long serpentine arm that had wrapped around his legs. Whatever this creature was, it was connected to a hovering silver disc that was in the air about 15 feet away. The major stood there in horror as he watched this creature and the sergeant retreat into the craft, which then rose vertically into the sky. Of course, he radioed for help, and while he was taken to the hospital for observation, search teams were sent out immediately. It wouldn't happen until 3 days later that they would find the body of Sergeant Lovett only 10 miles from the site where he was said to have disappeared from. The autopsy performed on him later also only raised more questions than answers, as his body was severely harmed. So of course there was an investigation that happened, and many people claim this investigation was detailed in a 600-page document labeled Project Grudge Report 13, but the problem with this is that no official information on Report 13 exists, and the US government denies its very existence. Though Grudge Reports 1 through 12 have been declassified, along with Report 14, no official mention or accounting of Report 13 exists, and the story solely relies on secondhand accounts of the horrible incident. In our number 7 spot today, we have Levelland. This incident took place in 1957 in Levelland, Texas, and actually was the inspiration for a scene in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In the real-life incident, dozens of citizens from across the city began individually reporting seeing a rocket or a strange set of lights or some sort of unidentified object, but that wasn't it. Whatever these citizens were seeing was also reportedly interfering with their vehicles as well. Engines were just suddenly dying out and lights were cutting off. If this happened to just one or two, this could have been some kind of strange coincidence, but it was way too many instances. Something else definitely had to have been at play. The authorities at first thought that the reports were a hoax until they too saw the strange lights as they began to investigate. This is where Project Blue Book came in to investigate, and they came up with quite the conclusion. They claimed that what had happened here was simply just a case of an electrical storm and ball lightning that caused the lights and the mechanical malfunctions. That's super reasonable, but the catch with this explanation is that there were no reported thunderstorms in the area that night at all. I'm just saying, something here clearly isn't adding up quite right. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Air Force disappearance. On the night of November 23rd, 1953, near the Canadian-US border, the United States Air Defense Command noticed a blip on their radar where there shouldn't have been one. This was showing that there was some sort of unidentified object that was in restricted airspace over Lake Superior. In response to this, an F-89C Scorpion jet was sent to investigate with 2 crew members. First Lieutenant Felix Moncla was piloting the craft, while Second Lieutenant Robert Wilson was observing the radar. Once in the air, the pair had trouble tracking the object, which kept changing its course, which then led to ground control helping to direct them. The jet pursued the unknown object for 30 minutes as it closed in on it at 500 miles per hour. After a while, the 2 blips on the radar, one being the unknown object and the other being the investigating jet, converged into one point, and then suddenly the radar return from the F-89 simply just disappeared from ground control's radar scope. Shortly after this, the radar blip that was from the unidentified object also veered off and then vanished. The men who were sent to investigate in the jet never returned from the mission, and there was never any wreckage found signifying an accident despite extensive searches. The men and the jet just disappeared completely. It is said that the explanations for the disappearance that have been released throughout the years have changed and flip-flopped in what they say happened, so at this point no one has any idea what truly happened here. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Roswell incident. This whole rigmarole started in in 1947 when some sort of a crash took place near a ranch in Roswell, New Mexico. Shortly after this, the Roswell Army Airfield released a statement saying that they had recovered a flying disc from the ranch, but the Army quickly retracted the statement and said that it wasn't that, but instead was a conventional weather balloon. This was a little sketchy, but most people just let it slide until the 1970s. What happened in the 70s is that a retired lieutenant colonel began to speak out. In an interview with a UFO researcher, he said that the weather balloon story was a cover-up and that alien remains were actually recovered from the crash site. There were both first and second-hand witnesses who claimed that not only were there at least one, but possibly more alien spacecrafts that had crashed at the scene, but also that extraterrestrial remains were also recovered by the military, who then began to engage in a cover-up. In 1994, the story changed from a weather balloon to nuclear test surveillance balloon from Project Mogul, and it was stated that the stories of the alien bodies were probably just test dummies that had been dropped from high altitudes. I'm not gonna lie, this whole thing sounds a little sketchy. I obviously wasn't there, so I can't say for certain what happened, but someone is definitely lying about it. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Foo Fighters. On a late November evening in 1944, nearing the end of the Second World War, Lieutenant Fred Ringwald was riding as observer in a night fighter that was being piloted by Lieutenant Ed Schluter with Lieutenant Donald J. Myers on radar. The men were in the Rhine Valley, which sits north of Strasbourg on the French and German border, when Lieutenant Ringwald saw something. He said, quote, "I wonder what those lights are over there in the hill." When the rest turned to look, they saw 8 to 10 fiery orange glowing lights. They checked with the ground radar, but nothing was registering. The men thought that there was a chance that these lights could be some kind of air weapon, so they turned themselves to be ready to fight, only to have the lights suddenly vanish. The 3 men who experienced the strange lights at first didn't tell anyone about what they saw because they feared being ostracized by those around them. This all changed, however, when stories of similar sightings began to spread through their unit. As it would turn out, many other pilots and flight crews experienced these same orange glowing lights, and one pilot even experienced a strange cigar-shaped flying object in this scenario. In this instance, the UFO was described as, quote, "a wingless cigar-shaped object glowing red just a few yards off the plane's wingtip." Lieutenant Krasny, justifiably spooked, instructed the pilot to attempt evasive maneuvers, but the glowing object stayed right next to the jet for several minutes before it, quote, "flew off and disappeared." Throughout the years, the explanations for what these people saw have ranged from things like combat fatigue to the works of Nazi astrophysicists, so at this point, what exactly happened here remains quite a mystery. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Shag Harbour incident. This UFO encounter is often referred to as Canada's Roswell, so I was shocked that I hadn't heard of it before. Basically, this incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbour, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claimed to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting on their porch, but the 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight pilot and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange out the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along on a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing it. Shortly after they noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. As for the ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy saw 4 blips on his Decca radar that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and this is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't the only one who saw it on board. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some friends ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet offshore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP, but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in the investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. But it was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were totally accounted for. So what could these witnesses have all seen? Since they never officially identified what it was, in the official Government of Canada documents it is listed as a UFO. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Betty and Barney Hill case. The Betty and Barney Hill case is definitely one of the most famous UFO abduction stories ever told, and it absolutely has some pretty compelling components. Basically, the story goes that the 2 were driving on a road in New Hampshire one night on the way home from a trip the pair had taken. Before they got into the car on on their way home, they were in a diner and figured that if they really pushed through, they could beat the wind and rains from an approaching hurricane. It was 10 p.m. when they left the diner, and they figured by around 2 a.m., 3 a.m. latest, they'd arrive home. As they drove, out of nowhere, a bright light started to follow them. Suddenly, they arrive home and it's somehow daylight, and their clothes are dirty and ripped, and their watches had stopped working. This is all jarring enough, but neither Betty nor Barney could figure out what happened. They were both missing time. Later, during a session with a psychiatrist, they were able to recall being touched by aliens during their abduction. Project Blue Book would come to investigate their claims, and while people remain skeptical, no one has ever been able to debunk their story. This officially went on to become the first ever widely publicized abduction story, and to this day, people still debate what really happened to the hills. And finally, in our number one spot today, we have the Westall incident. Taking it back to 1966, we have the largest mass UFO sighting in Australia that, at the time, was largely ignored. This incident took place when over 300 students and staff members of a school in Melbourne all witnessed multiple UFOs silently flying through the air before they landed in a nearby field. Well, there's been a ton of speculation about this incident in the many years it's been. One witness account stands out among the rest, and that is the account made by the science teacher from the school, Andrew Greenwood. He was alerted to the UFO event by a hysterical student, and when he went outside to see for himself, everything changed. Previously a skeptic of UFO stories, Andrew's mind was abruptly changed when he saw, as he described it, a round silver object about the size of a car with a metal rod sticking up in the air. He went on to explain that suddenly 5 planes came and surrounded the object, all while more people were gathering to watch. He called what happened next the most amazing flying he had ever seen, explaining that, quote, every time they got too close to the object, it would slowly accelerate, then rapidly accelerate, and then move away from them and stop. Then they would take off after it again, and the same thing would happen. This went on for about 20 minutes before the mysterious object just vanished. As weird as this all was, what was almost weirder was what happened next. Firstly, the headmaster of the school is said to have tried to put a stop to anyone talking about the incident at all, threatening severe punishment to any student or staff who was caught speaking about it, and when the Royal Australian Air Force contacted him, he refused to talk to them about it. There have also been stories of witnesses getting visits from people warning them not to speak of the incident. Andrew explained, quote, when he asked the physical education teacher to describe what she had seen herself so that he could compare it with his own observation, she just wouldn't say anything. Another witness who did talk to Andrew and described what she had seen in great detail, just 30 minutes later refused to speak to him and wouldn't say a word. Was this because of the threats from the headmaster, or was something else going on here? This is definitely a strange UFO story that leaves behind a lot of questions.
Starting off this countdown, we have the New Jersey Turnpike. On July 14th, 2001, tons of individuals stopped in awe as they saw strange orange and yellow lights in a V formation in the sky. It was just after midnight when these mysterious lights appeared. They were so strange that a number of drivers stopped along the highway to look at the sky. Apparently, these lights lasted for around 15 minutes before disappearing. Daniel Tarrant, who worked for the police department, was one of the many witnesses of this bizarre event. And apparently over a dozen calls were made to the local police department reporting these lights. It definitely freaked a lot of people out. Now, what's even freakier is that air traffic controllers said that it's impossible for airplanes or jets or space flights to have made that light. So that's just ruled completely out. To this day, we still don't know what the mystery light show was. But of course, it's probably aliens. Coming in at number 9, we have the Pentagon footage.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
So in April of last year, the Pentagon released footage of what they said was an unidentified flying object. These videos were recorded back in 2004 and 2015, but were only finally released when they thought it was safe to do so. So in one of the videos, you can see what appears to be a UFO flying in the sky. It was taken by naval aviators, and it shows some sort of objects moving through the sky. In the video, you can hear the pilots are in shock at what they're seeing. In fact, one of the pilots that witnessed this phenomena and captured it on video told CNN that the disc moved in ways he couldn't explain. Apparently 1 second it was there, and then next thing you know, it disappeared. He said, and I quote, "As I got close to it, it rapidly accelerated to the south and disappeared in less than 2 seconds. This was extremely abrupt, like a ping pong ball bouncing off a wall. It would hit and go the other way." Now that's pretty creepy if you ask me. Number 8, we have the O'Hare Airport saucer. On November 6th of 2006, 12 employees at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago witnessed a saucer-shaped craft outside of the airport. Several other people outside of the airport saw this as well. It occurred at around 4:15 p.m. that day. Witnesses say that the UFO hovered in the sky for about 5 minutes before shooting upward. When it did this, it created a big hole in the clouds. Airport employees claim that this was no way an airplane. The object was dark gray in color and around 6 to 24 feet in diameter. Some say it looked like a frisbee, it was just spinning in the sky, but others claim it wasn't rotating, it was just hovering. What's even weirder is how the object was very quiet. Again, to this day, no one knows what on earth it was that they saw. Maybe because it wasn't from Earth. And at number 7, we have the Maury Island incident. This one is crazy. Like, I don't even know what to believe anymore. So on June 27th, 1947, a man named Harold Dahl, his young son, and his dog went out on a conservation mission. While out on the fishing boat, they saw 6 donut-shaped aircrafts hovering in the air above them. The crafts then started dropping weird molten-type waste onto the lake. He described it as if it was raining lava or white metal. This ended up hitting his son's arm and the dog. The son was badly injured, and sadly the dog didn't survive. After the incident, obviously word got out, and then some man approached Harold saying that he also witnessed something exactly like that. But then Harold was also approached by another guy who he called, like, you know, the Men in Black, and was told not to talk about the incident. So again, pretty freaking creepy. In our 6th spot, we have the Westall UFO. Now, this next UFO sighting was actually talked about on Magellan TV's documentary called Westall 66 Suburban UFO Mystery, another great documentary. So on April 6th of 1966 in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, a weird UFO was seen flying in the air. This was seen by more than 200 students and teachers at a nearby school. It happened at around 11 a.m. that day. The students and teachers were outside playing sports when they saw this saucer-type object in the sky. It scared a lot of the students and stunned the teachers. They described it as being a silver shiny aircraft with a purple hue to it. Others say it was more green in color. But it was twice the size of a family car. On top of that, some say they saw 1 disc, while others say that they saw 3. This incident was explored by the Victorian Flying Saucer Research Society and Phenomena Research Australia, but they haven't been able to rationalize it. To this day, it's considered one of Australia's major unexplained UFO cases. There's way more to this case than I have time to talk about, so if you want to learn more, then check out the documentary. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Stephenville sightings. Stephenville is a small and quiet town in Texas. Nothing too crazy happens there, it's mainly just known for its dairy farms. But on January 8th, 2008, something quite strange happened that rocked that quiet town. On this day, dozens of residents saw white lights above Highway 67. A local pilot claimed that the lights, and I quote, spanned about a mile long and a half a mile wide and traveled about 3,000 miles per hour. The lights were accompanied with silence. Now, the US Air Force did claim that it was just a plane flying in the area, but the residents aren't buying this excuse. They said, and I quote, what they saw was too technologically advanced for current human abilities. Coming in at number 4, we have the USS Unknown Craft. In 2004, a Navy missile cruiser picked up some weird radar signals coming from an unknown craft. The cruiser was sailing off the coast of Southern California when this happened. It was coming from an object in the sky. Then apparently at some point the crew saw an oval-shaped object drop into the water. The water began to churn around it. Then a few seconds later the object shot back out of the water and accelerated away. They claim it moved more than 3 times the speed of sound and more than twice the speed of fighter jets. In our 3rd spot, we have Kenneth Arnold. On June 24th, 1947, a private pilot named Kenneth Arnold witnessed something pretty creepy while out flying. So on that day, Kenneth was out flying looking for a US Marine Corps airplane that crashed near Mount Rainier. There was a reward for anyone that could locate the plane. But while out looking, he saw 9 bright lights emitting from a shiny UFO. He claims it was traveling at around 1,200 miles per hour. Of course, if only Arnold had seen this thing, then people probably wouldn't believe him. But he wasn't the only one to witness it. A man named Fred Johnson also saw the lights and object. That same day, around the same time, he saw the object through his telescope. He also claimed that the object, whatever it was, interfered with his compass. Arnold was just going to dismiss what he saw as a mirage until Johnson came forward explaining he saw it too. In our second spot, we have the Flatwoods Monster. On September 12, 1952, 7 individuals and a dog witnessed a UFO. And then they saw what they believed to be an alien. So on this day, 6 boys aged 10 to 16, a mom and a dog were at the park playing. While doing so, they saw a pulsing red light flash across the sky and then crash down. 3 of the boys ran to go get one of the boys' mom to then go check it out. The dog followed. When they neared the area where the thing crashed, they saw a 10-foot tall Frankenstein-like monster. That's how they described it. Even the dog was afraid and ran away from it. Apparently this monster had blood red eyes, a green face, and it glowed. It even had claws. One of the boys was so afraid he actually peed his pants. I mean, it would sound fishy if it was just a group of boys that claimed to see a UFO and alien, but then the mom saw it too and verifies that this story is true. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Berkshire's UFO. This undoubtedly is the most mysterious and scariest UFO sighting and encounter on this list. On September 1st, 1969, something happened that changed the lives of multiple people in Berkshire County forever. So on that day, a bunch of people claimed to have seen a number of strange lights. Some people even claim that they were abducted by this bright light, or randomly time passed and they don't know what happened for the hours lost. One of the people that witnessed this was Melanie Kirchdorfer. That night, her and her family went to a Dairy Queen to get ice cream. Then they went to a nearby lake. While her father backed into the parking lot at the lake, a strange aura came around the car. They don't remember much after that, but Melanie remembers being levitated and then being on a spaceship. Another man named Tom Warner remembers being on the spaceship as well, and remembers seeing Melanie beside him. Before that, they never even knew each other. That same night, Jane and her friend Mary were driving home when they saw several bright lights in front of them. Her and a couple of the other cars actually pulled over because the lights were so bright that they couldn't see where they were driving. When they got out of their car, they saw a huge object floating over the road in front of them. And many other people also shared several stories from that night as well. So it's quite creepy that many people came forward, all random individuals with no relation to each other, but had such similar stories. What do you guys think about this list? Do you believe in aliens? Let me know in the comments below. And now I'm gonna move on to the comment shout out portion. I'll be shouting out comments from the video top 10 places scarier than Area 51. It was a marathon video. Kabila Zahara commented, 3% of people will see this message, but stay safe and wear your mask. Please do so. Just please. Just do as you're told. Wear that mask. It's not a big deal. Ronnie McKendra commented, planes do scare me, that's why I don't go on planes. Amen to that. I don't like flying either, so. I don't think we're supposed to defy gravity, but you know. The Lamb Sauce, love that name, commented, number 1, my house. When the toilet seat is warm but you're home alone. Honestly, that would be terrifying if, you don't have heated toilet seats, but whew.
Number 10, 2 white lights. Okay, so this didn't happen in the States, but Canada. And all I'm saying is that Biden could get some info out of Mr. Trudeau if he really wanted to. On January 29th, 2023, Canadian air traffic controllers and pilots couldn't identify 2 white lights moving in a circular pattern reported over Canada's Northwest Territories. Good evening, just wondering, do you got 2 planes that are just to the east of your field doing circuits or maneuvers? A crew member aboard the Canadian North flight headed to Yellowknife asked their traffic controllers. Negative, I have no reported traffic in the area, the Yellowknife air traffic controller replied. Do you have a visual on something? The crew responded somewhat hesitantly, yeah, we're looking at 2 lights dancing around here to the east of your field. They're above us, about I don't know what. We're not seeing them on TCAS, Traffic Collision Avoidance System, but
but we can see the lights moving around. Then there's a pause before the crew member radios back to say, "We're not crazy. No, we believe you," the air traffic controller replies, and the sighting remains unexplained. I need answers, people. Why are there just 2 random lights in the sky? Number 9. Over New Mexico. On February 21st, 2021, a pilot flying over New Mexico at an altitude of 37,000 feet reported seeing a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast over the top of them, according to the published audio. American Airlines confirmed that the radio transmission came from Flight 2292. The FAA a few days later stated a pilot reported seeing an object over New Mexico shortly after noon local time on Sunday, February 21st, 2021. FAA air traffic controllers did not see any object in the area on their radar scopes. Seems like air traffic control can never see these objects, but the pilots can, and I can't tell if that's better or worse. Number 8. Shot down object over Alaska. On February 10th, 2023, aka like a month ago, the US military shot down an unidentified airborne object over northeastern Alaska. US officials said they believed the object to be a balloon, but couldn't confirm it since it broke into pieces after hitting the ocean, the New York Times reported. How convenient. News outlets owned by the Chinese Communist Party said Biden's response has shown the world how immature and irresponsible the US has been in dealing with this case. Oof, even other people are criticizing him. Number 7. Shot down object over Lake Huron. On February 12th, 2023, just 2 days later, a US F-16 jet shot down an unidentified object over Lake Huron. An octagonal object with strings hanging from it was detected over northern Montana, Wisconsin, and the upper peninsula of Michigan at 20,000 feet. This was believed to be the same object tracked over Montana and monitored by the government the night before. Melissa Dalton, Assistant Defense Secretary of Homeland Defense, and General Glenn Venherk, head of U.S. North Command, say officials could not definitively assess what the objects were, so they acted out of an abundance of caution to protect U.S. security and interest. These most recent objects did not pose a military threat, but their path and proximity to sensitive DoD sites and the altitude that they were flying could be a hazard to civilian aviation and thus raise concerns, Melissa said. Operations are underway with multiple agencies, including the Coast Guard, to gather the object's remains and determine where it came from, they added. And when or if they figure out what it is, I wonder if they'll actually tell us. Probably not though. Number 6. Rosemount UFOs. A man living in Rosemount said he encountered a similar UFO on 4 separate occasions. On August 4th, 2017, the man was near his Rosemount home when he saw what he described as a black object with bright orange lights coming from the craft and flying over the area. Nearly a month later, on September 6, 2017, he saw 3 crafts with the same description hovering above downtown Rosemont. 2 days later, a singular craft returned to Inver Grove Heights, and he spotted the craft one last time on March 12, 2018. The man took photos or videos for each of the events and submitted it to the Mutual UFO Network. Seems like these aliens could have been stalking him, which I think is even more creepy. Number 5. Navy pilots. Recently, 2 former Navy pilots were interviewed by 60 Minutes on CBS News about a UFO sighting over the Pacific Ocean in 2004. Commander Dave Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich spotted the unidentified object during a training exercise, but were unable to classify it. Dave described it as a little white tic-tac looking object, adding that it lacked conventional exhaust plumes and had no wings or visible markings. It also moved erratically, the pilot said. In an interview with NBC News, Dave described the 2004 encounter, calling the object the strangest, most obscure thing I've ever seen flying. As soon as we look down, we see the white water, and then we see this little white tic-tac. It's pointing north-south, and it's just going forward, back, left, right, he said, adding that it was bouncing around like a ping-pong ball. Dave said he approached the mysterious object to take a closer look, and it began mirroring his movements. Then, when the pilot decided to get within half a mile of the UFO, it suddenly vanished. I'm surprised the government even let them do this interview, but my question is, if he did get closer, what were they gonna do? Wave hi to the alien? aliens? Number 4. Multiple objects in the sky. Ryan Graves, a former Navy pilot who testified that he witnessed unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAP, with his own eyes, and he called on President Joe Biden to investigate the mysterious objects spotted in American airspace. Ryan, a former fighter pilot, explained that after 2014, when upgrades were made to our radar system, our squadron made a startling discovery. There were unknown objects in our airspace. And these were not mere balloons like the Chinese spy balloon that dominated the country's attention in February. These were no mere balloons. They could hold their position, appearing motionless, despite Category 4 hurricane force winds of 120 knots. They did not have any visible means to lift or control surfaces. In other words, nothing that resembled normal aircraft with wings, flaps, or engines. These are not isolated incidents, Ryan said. We have a real UFO problem, and it's not balloons. The point is that we don't have as clear as an understanding of what's above our heads as we thought we did. There are uncertainties up there that we have to deal with. If we don't do it, our adversaries are going to take advantage of that uncertainty, that weakness, to spy on us with various means, as we've seen. It's pretty clear. If there are things over our head that we're not sure what they are, we need to figure it out. If they're adversarial, it's a national security issue. We have mechanisms for that. If it's not a national security issue, and if it's not an adversarial platform, then it's a matter for scientific inquiry. Not gonna lie, this scares me a little. Number 3. Leaked video. A leaked Navy video captured in July 2019 showed a sphere-shaped unidentified object flying over water near San Diego. The footage, obtained by documentary filmmaker and shared with NBC News, appeared to show the mysterious object flying for a few minutes before disappearing into the water. The video was captured by a Navy aircraft and recorded in the USS Unknown Combat Information Center, according to filmmaker Jeremy Corbell. The clip appeared to show a spherical object flying above the water for a few minutes near San Diego before it just vanishes. It splashed, military personnel can be heard saying in the video. The Defense Department confirmed that the clip was recorded by Navy personnel and said that it will be reviewed by the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, a panel established last year to gain insight into the nature and origins of such objects. Number 2. You saw something you shouldn't. In 2008, a large aircraft hovered above Stevensville, Texas. Many people in the community saw it, and according to the Mutual UFO Network, a pilot named Steve Allen reported that the unusual aircraft was flying at an estimated 3,000 miles per hour and was being chased by fighter jets. Then a man named Rick Sorrell said he saw the same thing while hunting. Later, Rick said a strange man knocked on his door and said, "Son, we have the same caliber weapons you have, but we have more of them. You need to shut your mouth about what you saw." Creepy. Was this the Men in Black, people from their government, or real aliens? Who knows, but if that happened to me, I think I'd move out of state. And coming in at number 1 is the Pentagon. The Pentagon's new Office for Investigating Potential UFO Sightings received hundreds of news reports in 2022, and while it can explain more than half of these events, a sizable chunk remains a mystery. Within the new batch of sightings, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and the Office of Director of National Intelligence say they're focusing on some 171 cases, including some in which objects appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. Since it was formed last summer, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has received 366 reports of unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP. That total reflects 247 new UAP reports and another 119 that occurred between March 2021 but hadn't been included in an earlier report. The new numbers indicate a steep rise in UAP sightings. The report released in June 2021 listed just 144 reports, covering a 17-year period. With the subsequent additions, 510 UAP reports were in their files at the end of August 2022. Officials say they believe the rise in UAP reports is due to the US government efforts to destigmatize the topic of UAP and instead recognize the potential risk the phenomenon poses, both as an aviation hazard and potential adversarial activity, such as foreign surveillance efforts. I don't know though, it seems like they're really starting to believe in aliens to me.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the 1976 Tehran incident. The 1976 Huron UFO incident is a notable case in UFOlogy that took place on September 19, 1976. The incident involved a luminous object that was observed hovering over the city by two F-4 Phantom II jet interceptors of the Iranian Air Force. The object was detected on radar and appeared to be capable of jamming the communication systems of the jets. The pilots reported that they saw a brightly lit diamond-shaped object that emitted a green light, and they attempted to engage it with missiles. However, the object evaded their attempts and quickly disappeared. At a pilots conference in 2007, one of the pilots in this incident, Parvez Jafari, said he attempted to fire at the UFO, but something strange was preventing him from doing so. He said, quote, "My weapons jammed and my radio communications garbled." The incident was investigated by the Iranian government and the US Defense Intelligence Agency, and it has been the subject of much speculation and debate among UFO enthusiasts. Some argue that the incident was evidence of extraterrestrial activity, while others suggest it may have been a secret military experiment or some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. Despite the official investigation, the incident remains unresolved and its true nature remains a mystery. In our number 9 spot today, we have the McMinnville UFO photographs. The McMinnville UFO photographs are a series of 2 photographs taken by Paul and Evelyn Trent on May 11, 1950 in McMinnville, Oregon. The photos depict a metallic disc-shaped object in the sky with trees and buildings visible in the foreground. The Trents claimed that they saw the object hovering in the sky and were able to capture it on camera. The photographs quickly gained widespread attention and were widely circulated in newspapers and magazines, and they were also examined by several experts, including the US Air Force, which conducted an investigation known as Project Blue Book. Famous project here on Most Amazing Top 10. The Trents maintained that the photographs were genuine and that they had not tampered with them in any way. However, some skeptics have suggested that the photographs may have been hoaxed or that the objects in the photographs were just a common object. Despite the controversy surrounding the photographs, however, they remain one of the most famous and well-known UFO sightings in history. The photographs have been the subject of numerous articles, books, and documentaries, and have inspired countless discussions and debates about the existence of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. In our number 8 spot today, we have the USS Nimitz Tic Tac UFO incident. This UFO sighting comes from 2004. On November 14th of that year, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this, the crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out at about 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate went over in 2 fighter jets, and when they arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, the white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it. Like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust. The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. And when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of the fighter jets. So, faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what it was, but it certainly was beyond our current capabilities. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Aguadilla Airport incident. The Aguadilla Airport UFO incident occurred on April 25, 2013, when a strange object was spotted hovering above the Rafael Hernandez Airport in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. The object was initially detected by radar and later confirmed by security cameras as a glowing, unidentified object that appeared to be traveling at a low altitude. The object was described as being around 4 to 5 feet in length, and it moved very quickly and very erratically. It was also observed to emit a bright white light and appeared to be changing shape. The incident attracted widespread attention and was investigated by several government agencies, including the Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Homeland Security. The object was ultimately classified as an unidentified flying object, or UFO, and no explanation was given for its presence in the area. It is even said that a US Customs and Border Protection aircraft actually captured infrared video of the incident that was given to the Scientific Coalition for UFOlogy by a whistleblower. This video is said to show show the UFO traveling at super low altitudes, sometimes lower than the treetops, but at speeds close to 100 miles per hour. The Aguadilla Airport UFO incident is considered one of the most significant UFO sightings in recent history due to the high level of documentation and the involvement of government agencies. It continues to be a topic of discussion and speculation among UFO enthusiasts and researchers, and has contributed to ongoing efforts to uncover the truth about the nature and origin of UFO sightings around the world. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Project Blue Book sighting. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was once tasked with being an investigator for Project Blue Book, which was the name used to describe a study of UFOs conducted by the United States Air Force from March 1952 to December 17, 1969, when the project was terminated. Okay, we talk about Project Blue Book a lot. You gotta know what it is. While his job was meant to be to investigate and essentially debunk UFO sightings, later in life he took to Congress to stand up and explain his own UFO encounter that he was never able to explain away. The moment that truly stuck with him all of these years took place back in 1952 when he was sent off to Newfoundland after there were reports of a UFO that had crashed off of the coast of St. John's. As he arrived to the scene, there were at least 100 people who all stood and stared into the water, and as he was able to follow their gaze and see what they were all looking at, he couldn't quite believe his eyes. He recalled the water being quite clear, and under it you could see two circular crafts, each one approximately 18 feet in diameter. He said that they were both floating just below the surface of the water, no more than 20 feet from the shore, and not only this, but he could also see two beings with the crafts. He said, quote, "The first thing I saw was the UFOs, and it was apparent to me that they were doing something to the craft, and I couldn't really tell what because they were on the bottom side of it and not visible to me except when they would occasionally get over to the side where I could see them." He claims he watched on as the beings worked on the craft until one of them raised out of the water and disappeared, but not before accelerating to speeds in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 miles per hour. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Coyne-Mansfield helicopter incident. The Coyne-Mansfield helicopter UFO incident occurred on October 18, 1973, when 4 members of the Ohio Army National Guard were flying in a helicopter over Mansfield, Ohio. Suddenly, they encountered a large metallic disc-shaped object that was hovering in the sky. The object began to move towards the helicopter, causing the crew to take evasive maneuvers. Despite their efforts, the object continued to follow them, eventually passing overhead and disappearing into the distance. The crew reported the incident to their superiors, and an investigation was launched by the military and the Federal Aviation Administration. The incident received significant media attention, and it remains one of the most compelling UFO sightings on record. What makes this incident particularly intriguing is the credibility of the witnesses. The crew were all experienced pilots with military training, and their account of the incident was corroborated by radar data and other witnesses on the ground. Despite extensive investigations, no satisfactory explanation has ever been offered for what they saw that day. In our number 4 spot today, we have Apollo 11. So we can sit here on Earth all day and talk about the potential for alien life and UFOs, but who would know more than the people who have actually been to space, which are of course astronauts. Definitely on the list of coolest and scariest jobs in the world, there haven't been a ton of people who have had the unbelievable privilege of experiencing space firsthand, but there are even less of them who have claimed to see something that seems completely unexplainable. People who have claimed these sorts of things include Edgar Mitchell, Catherine Coleman, and Dr. Brian O'Leary. The very interesting part about many of these claims is that they also include some sort of government cover-up as well with their claims. There was also Buzz Aldrin, who spoke about his Apollo 11 experience, and he detailed the crew seeing something flying alongside them, and at first they believed it was the final stage of a detached rocket, but then Mission Control confirmed that it was actually 6,000 miles away from them, leaving them with no answers on what the flying object could be. I can't imagine going to space at all, let alone encountering a UFO flying right beside you. Also, I can't believe that I hadn't heard of that story before, because to me, that sounds like full-blown alien contact. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Go Faster video. In 2017, after the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program became more well known, a video was released of an encounter between an FA-18 Super Hornet and some sort of unidentified flying object. This video was the third in a series of 3 videos, and there weren't a ton of details released about exactly what happened during this encounter. Using the Raytheon Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod, they were able to capture an extremely fast-moving white oval that was around 45 feet long. The oval had no wings and didn't appear to have any kind of exhaust either. They were tracking the UFO at an altitude of 25,000 feet just above the Atlantic Ocean, and then they were shocked as the craft rotated on its axis and flew away. There was no explanation released with the footage because it truly is unbelievable and currently unexplainable. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Delphos Ring incident. The Delphos Ring UFO incident occurred on November 2nd, 1971 in Delphos, Kansas, when a family witnessed a strange object hovering over their farm. The UFO emitted a bright light that illuminated the surrounding area and left a glowing ring in the ground after it disappeared. The family reported the incident to the local sheriff, who took a sample of the ring for analysis. Investigations were conducted by several experts, including the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, who collected soil samples and found that the ring was caused by the removal of topsoil, which had been exposed to a high amount of heat. Additionally, a high level of radiation was also detected at the site. The incident received widespread media coverage and sparked debates about the existence of extraterrestrial life and the possibility of alien visitation. Some skeptics argued that the incident could have been caused by natural phenomena or a hoax, but the witnesses maintained that they saw a genuine UFO. Despite the years of investigation, it's been no conclusive explanation for the incident has been found, leaving the mystery of the Delphos Ring UFO unsolved. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Shag Harbour incident. This incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbour, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claimed to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting out on their porch, but the 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight pilot and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange out the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along on a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing it. Shortly after they first noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. As for the ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy, he saw 4 blips on his Deca radar that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and this is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't the only one who saw it on board either. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some friends ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet offshore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in the investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. It was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were accounted for, so what could have all those witnesses seen? Since they never officially identified what it was, in the official Government of Canada documents, it is listed as a UFO.